Hey, welcome back, everyone. If you've been sticking around, probably a familiar face here, Nick Walsh, developer advocate at AWS. But more importantly, I am joined by a very special guest, Jen MacLean, worldwide business development leader here at AWS Game Tech. We're going to be sitting down talking a little bit about what is new here in 2020 and with reInvent launches in the game space. Jen, thank you for joining me. We've got a lot to talk about.
Awesome. I'm glad to be here, Nick.
Awesome. So we're talking about games, and there's a lot of different directions we can take this conversation, I'd imagine. I know there are a few games that have come out recently that I'm excited to go play after reInvent is done. I won't name any names, so leave that up to the audience to guess. But when we're talking about AWS, again, cloud infrastructure provider, and the games industry, what does that intersection look like? I know that it's very multifaceted, but if you could try to take a stab at summarizing that, what does that look like?
Yeah, really, our elevator pitch is that we want to help game developers of every size make better player experiences. We want to help game developers make better games, faster games, more efficient games, more fun games. And we want to do that whether you are a customer the size of Epic or a small two-person shop. We want to help you make great games.
Yeah, wonderful. It's we talk a lot about AWS providing services that grow with your company, and I think there's no better testament to that than the fact that we've seen Epic, the creators of Fortnite, on the main stage at reInvent in Andy's keynotes for some of the past few years. Again, Fortnite, one of these like great stories, right? A game that explodes in popularity and allowing their team to be able to focus on building fun features and gameplay mechanics instead of worrying on scaling up data centers and flying around the world to rack and stack some servers is certainly a fun one. But again, I want to focus a little bit on sort of the fact that there's a variety of game studios, not just in size, but I'd imagine also in geography, right? We've had some unprecedented times here. We're truly online, digital, distributed first now, at least for the foreseeable future. What does the games industry story look like, sort of outside of the epics of the world, or outside of some of these larger studios with a campus, let's say?
Yeah, that's a great question, especially in 2020. This year has been unprecedented in terms of how it's really made us all rethink how we work, and especially in a collaborative field like game development, where there's so much energy that you get when you exchange ideas with your colleagues. How do you do that in a way that you can stay safe and healthy? And so one of the things that we've seen really take off in 2020 is a collection of services that we call game production in the cloud. And this is essentially helping game developers work with teams no matter where somebody is located, whether you are in Melbourne or Madrid or Seattle, so that you can make great games with your colleagues. And we do that in really three ways with game production in the cloud. One is enabling people to build assets directly in the cloud. So they never actually download the physical assets to their machine. They do it through an EC2 instance that is running their asset creation software. The other is moving your build processes to the cloud. This can be a huge savings in time and money. Game developers out there will know just how onerous a build process can be. And the number one rule of game development is don't break the build. And then third, of course, is using the cloud for playtesting.
Yeah, awesome. When I hear each of those different parts of the pipeline in games production, that seems to be relevant regardless of whether you're a small indie studio or a single developer game studio or a large company. So it's exciting to see sort of this broad approach to solving all of those problems. Um, you know, when I'm imagining this again, I haven't. I love playing games. Haven't developed many or any myself. To not let's not lie to myself here. I've not developed a game. But this idea of being able to virtualize workspaces and infrastructure and even data sounds immense, right? We in the development world can look over people's shoulders and say like, oh hey, look at this fun demo I have. But imagine the game space that's more complex, right? There's probably, at least on the design side, I'd imagine difficult or complicated GPU infrastructure or GPU instances that 3D modelers might be using, maybe play testing on, and being able to sort of bake in your infrastructure to your sharing mechanisms and doing so in a secure and compliant manner. Again, when you can't be there looking over someone's shoulder, that's exactly what you would want.
Yeah, exactly. And you hit on a lot of the really key issues here. Game production in the cloud is a service that really impacts a game developer no matter what size they are. So if you're a very, very large multinational game developer, odds are that you have multiple studios around the world working on your games. So how can you set up asset control so that people can securely transfer assets so that they can securely work no matter where they are, no matter what time of day it is. And they can do so in a way that protects the security and the safety of the IP and the assets that they work on. Game production in the cloud is a great solution to that because the assets are never downloaded to a physical machine. And this is especially important in situations like today where you might be working on a home machine that your corporate IT has no control over, right? That I don't know about anybody else, but we share a gaming PC at my household, and I am always a little worried about what my 15-year-old might be downloading. So, you don't want to have somebody working on professional assets in a machine like that. Game production in the cloud is a great answer to that security challenge. Second is making sure that when you onboard new team members, which is particularly challenging right now, you can deploy the right software with a touch of the button. It's super easy, it's super convenient. You don't have to worry about physically shipping a machine that's configured the way that you want someplace else in the world. You can do that instantly through the cloud. And that's a really great advantage in terms of helping to give somebody a great experience as they start out on a new team. And then
Yeah.
if you're working with an outsourced studio, if you're working as work for hire, which a lot of our smaller customers do to help fund their own game development, or if you're working with somebody else who's providing professional services for your game development, uh, doing that in the cloud means that you can scale up, you can scale down, you can give people access to exactly the assets they need, and you can always track exactly who has access to your assets as well.
Certainly, as I'm listening to this, even more sort of value propositions jump into my head, and I'll say them out loud, but let me know if I'm crazy or not. One example here would be the ability to, you talked about investing in physical infrastructure, providing those to your employees when you onboard them, and managing, and there's a lot of costs associated with that. But more than anything, we know that hardware in the consumer gaming space, or even on the production side, accelerates. There are always new GPUs that are more efficient than the last generation. And so the move to cloud enables not investing in a piece of hardware that has to have a 10-year ROI. You can simply continuously upgrade your digital infrastructure through AWS and continue to get the best price to power ratio for your back end production stack, which is always wanted, right? Now the second one that I think about, and maybe this one's a little bit hairier, but when you're thinking about trying to benchmark some of your games or your beta tests, what have you, the ability to easily provision a bunch of different virtualized hardware with a variety of different configurations, GPUs, CPU strength. The ability to do that in automated fashion very easily, and only pay for the test time with AWS and EC2 and all of the services there, sounds like it would be a pretty big step up from having to have a wall full of CPUs that you've racked and stacked and are manually deploying these builds to test. But is that something that customers are doing in the wild, or am I barking up the wrong tree?
No, you're not. And there's really three ways that customers do that. So first, they can use Device Farm to test their apps on a large range of different devices over the cloud. Especially if you're a small studio, you just don't want to invest your limited resources in creating a device library. And so Device Farm helps solve that problem for customers. Second is build processes. So our customer, Apocalypse Studio, their CEO Dennis Dyack wrote a blog post for us explaining that how before they moved to their game production to the cloud, their build process would take 6 to 7 hours, and they did that overnight. So imagine the productivity hit if you have a worldwide team, right? At some point, people are going to be down for 6 to 7 hours. That's ridiculous. But running on AWS, their build process takes about 20 minutes and it costs $2 per build. That's an incredible savings in time. And the cost for that, when you look at $2 per build, only when you need to make a new build compared to setting up a server, having it under somebody's desk, the inherent risks there, it's huge. And then third, when you look at actually creating those assets, we have a customer, Quantic Dream, who shared their experience in moving to the cloud. And what they found is they've actually been able to create these amazing AAA games. So Quantic Dream is known for games like Heavy Rain and Detroit Become Human. They've been able to onboard new staff members and grow in 2020 thanks to moving their asset production processes largely to the cloud.
Yeah, no, immensely valuable. We talk a lot in the software development world about how developer productivity is important, but it's always a little difficult to try and manage to tie a dollar amount to that. But I think like on the $2 per build sort of ROI equation, this is much more than just being able to compare the cost of builds to managed, self-managed on-premises infrastructure. What we see in the game space is the desire to get to market faster, right?
Yep.
Sometimes you have deadlines that you've announced for a game to be produced, and if that's not movable, you only have a few options, right? You either delay the game, and then that obviously is disruptive to their customer experience and the player's experience, or you don't get all of the features into the game that you want, right? So in a way, we think of costs and dollars and cents, but time is one of this most scarce resources that we have to work with. So being able to sort of make those builds go from hours to minutes
Yeah.
just frees up so much time to be able to really do what you want to do. And again, sometimes it's difficult to see that on a balance sheet, but when it comes time to launching the game, this is certainly something that pays off in spades with player feedback.
Yeah.
When you get to really deliver as a game studio what you really want them to have.
Yeah, and it's not just time, it's about the people too. It's about the developers who are actually making the game because something like game production in the cloud means that you can attract and retain talent literally from around the world. And we know from the International Game Developers Association that game developers change jobs every 2 to 3 years. So imagine if you have a family, if you have kids, or you're taking care of a partner or parents, asking them to move every 2 to 3 years, that becomes a really, really difficult proposition. And that means that the game industry loses talent. This sort of solution means that you can stay, you can live where you want to live and work where you want to work. That leads to happier game developers. It leads to game developers staying in the industry. It leads to better games. And as somebody who is a gamer and also been in game development for more than 20 years, like, that's what I get most excited about because at the end of the day, we are supporting the people, the teams that make the games that we love.
Yeah, exactly. I think this feeling of whenever you start first day of school, first day at a new company, there is always some sort of onboarding period. And to hear that statistic that game developers often switch companies every 2 to 3 years, certainly there just seems, from the selfish player's perspective, some lost productivity, some
Yeah,
lack of efficiency there. If nothing else, I can say that AWS helps deliver better games for all players. That's something I have no qualms with. But another thing that really jumps out to me is that when you have non-cloud processes,
mhm,
um, they're largely going to be unstandardized company to company, even within a given company, maybe office to office, right? One of the value propositions I see here is the ability to work with a standard set of tools, meaning it should be easier to recruit, right? You no
right.
longer have to recruit for a vague set of experiences like DevOps broadly or 3D modeling. You can instead say, hey, here are the industry standard tools that we use that we know a large number of other companies operate with and build and deliver games with. And when you can recruit talent that is already very proficient in these tools, it makes it easier for them to get up to speed and be effective in the role,
Yeah.
thus giving you back some development time and delivering more features by launch day.
Yeah, so if you think about it kind of over the life cycle of game creation, right? You are a producer and you've decided on the game that you want to make, then you can hire somebody who is the most talented game developer who has experience with the tools that you use anywhere in the world. You can deploy a virtual desktop or use other third-party software solutions like Teradici or Dice to deliver exactly the software that they need. Never have to have IT ship them a desk, never, or a machine, never have to have them come into an office. You can then have them interact virtually with the team. They upload their assets, builds get made in 20 minutes. So you can see it starts to kind of snowball and makes it easier to make those great games that we love to play. Whether you are a large AAA studio working with teams of 500 people or a small indie studio team of five, you're still going to be able to make a great game. And for me, the idea that these solutions can help empower game creators, whether it's by making it easier to use the software, to give your team the software that helps make them productive, helps them get their ideas into a game as easily, as quickly, as flexibly as possible, or whether it means that we take a lot of the processes that can, really be wasted time, like build processes. We automate them, we make them fast, we make them cheap, we make them easy, we make them scale. And then we help you actually test your game. We help you launch it, we help you run it. Like that's pretty amazing when you think about all of the different ways we support game developers in creating those great player experiences.
Precisely, we talk about the build, test, deploy loop in software development, and there's certainly an analog here in games development. And it's not just about launching it the first time, right? You want to have continuous development. You want to have the ability to redeploy patches without downtime, so no downtime deployments. All of this immensely valuable. One other thing I wanted to touch on, we've spoken a lot about how the move to AWS for game studios enables the supporting of a remote workforce, right? And that's been no more important than this year. But the other thing that I have noticed, and maybe you're going to have to do a little bit of teaching here. I've played my fair share of games. I look at the credits screen at the end of some of these, and I see, multiple offices listed, or sometimes there are parts of the game that are not built in house that are instead worked on in collaboration with another studio, oftentimes in another part of the world. So when we're talking about this, outside of just onboarding new employees into your organization, does a globally distributed set of services and a platform like AWS help in any way to work and foster that collaboration with other game studios?
Yeah, absolutely. So we often see that large game companies will do a multi-studio production effort. So that might mean, for example, that you have studios in Montreal, studios in San Francisco, studios in London, studios in Ukraine, all working together. A smaller studio might end up saying, "Wow, we need really specialized expertise, maybe in a multiplayer game server, or we need really specialized expertise in using AI to analyze player data." And so it doesn't make sense for us to hire somebody full time. Let's bring on somebody as a consultant, or let's bring on somebody to do this specific piece of work. Or you also often have smaller developers who fund their own game development by doing that kind of outsourced work as well. So the really great thing about game production in the cloud is that it enables those remote teams to work together effectively because it gives people access to exactly the assets they need in a way that is fast and in a way that is scalable. And the nice thing about our regions and availability zones is it means that you can have somebody who is working in Montreal and somebody who is working in Seattle and somebody who is working in London and someone who's working in Ukraine, all accessing the right region, the right AZ for where they are, and doing it in a way that gives a really great experience for the creators. And one of the things that I'm really proud of is when you read the Quantic Dreams quotes from their CEO, talking about how the artists were able to move to a cloud-based production solution and have an experience that was comparable to sitting in Quantic Dreams physical offices. And that is our goal, to make sure that everybody has a very best possible experience when they're creating that kind of product.
Certainly so. Here we are at reInvent 2020 talking about enabling creators to build games. There have been too many launches for me to name on my fingers and toes or count on my fingers and toes, but we're here in the industry recap for games. So, if you could give us a quick digest, are there any particular launches that studios and people in the game space are probably going to want to look and dive deeper on?
Oh, that's a really great question, and there's so many. And because I specialize in small to mid-sized studios, I would be remiss if I did not give Hades a lot of love. Hades by Supergiant, probably one of the best games out there, and certainly redefined the roguelike genre. Um, I'm in Boston, so our friends at Proletariat had an amazing launch this year, and I'm really excited about that. They've done really great things, and it's been great to see that studio grow and develop. And then for me personally, I got my start working in strategy games. So I got my start as a playtester on one of the Civilization games, and I've always had that soft spot for hardcore strategy games. So I have been spending way, way, way too much time with Crusader Kings 3 from Paradox Interactive. And as soon as I am done with that, I am heading right to Empire of Sin by Romero Games, also published by Paradox. And I think what is really interesting about all of these games is, they did something amazing in a really challenging situation. And they did it by really looking at what makes a great player experience. So if you look, for example, at Crusader Kings 3, and I'm going to nerd out a little bit here, so bear with me. The onboarding experience between Crusader Kings 2 and Crusader Kings 3 changed tremendously. It's so much easier for a new player in Crusader Kings 3. If you look, for example, at Hades, like in Hades, you're expected to die a lot and you will die a lot. And they actually built in this great kind of power up mechanism to make it accessible for people who are really terrible at roguelikes like me, but love the game anyway. So I think when you look at the titles that have really moved us the most in 2020, and that at least for me have made the biggest impression, it's the ones that are accessible and help players have a great experience no matter what their familiarity level is, no matter what their skill level is. And in a lot of ways, that kind of gets back to the core of what we do here at AWS, right? Like we want to empower those great creatives. We want to make those great player experiences, whether you're a team of two or a team of 200 or a team of 2000. If we can help even a little bit, help those teams make an amazing experience, that's what it's all about.
Certainly so. Shout out to Hades and the folks over at Supergiant. I've been playing a lot of Hades recently. I know they've won quite a few awards, so I don't know how much my praise is worth over there. And then also, you mentioned Civilization and that franchise. I'm sure it has been alive and kicking, due in no small part to some of the early work you may have done over there. But we talk about these wonderful games that creators are buildings and studios. Some of that, I'd hope, is due to the underlying technology that we have probably announced here at reInvent. And while players may never think about the underlying tech that underpins some of the studios that build their games, anything in particular that we've seen from the keynotes or leading up to reInvent here in 2020 that could be of relevance to folks? I can think of some, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think we've seen some really great announcements, particularly in compute. The one that got me the most virtual high fives from my friends on social media was the announcement of Mac instances in EC2. Because if you are a game developer making mobile games, then you are almost certainly publishing for the Apple App Store, and this makes that so much easier. It brings the flexibility, the security, the scalability of the AWS cloud to making iOS apps, and that's a huge win for developers.
Wonderful. Yeah, we spoke earlier about device farm and the ability to test and deploy your builds to a large breadth of services, and now seeing that really come to fruition in Mac OS EC2 instance. Again, something I don't think anyone was predicting coming up on reInvent this year is certainly one to watch. And again, prior I mentioned consumer grade GPUs available in on demand instances through EC2. I believe those in the latest AMD G4 AD instances. Again, just offering more flexibility for developers to build and test and not need to manage their own instances themselves. If you want to distribute those instances through things like workspaces, whether you're doing graphic design work or again play testing or trying to benchmark some of your builds, really just meeting game studios where they are with the infrastructure that they're trying to test on, but in with the elasticity, on demand pricing, and the ability to easily upgrade as new instances come out. Certainly exciting.
Yeah, exactly.
Wonderful. Well, we're running up against the clock here. We've got some praise from Twitch chat. A lot of folks very interested in a lot of the launches we spoke about. A lot of fans there, Jen, of yours. But there is so much more content for folks in the game space that we can't cover on today's broadcast. I will try my best to get some links to games relevant talks and sessions that'll be happening here during reInvent. But for anyone who wants to learn a little bit more about games or game tech here at AWS, is there a particular link we can send them to?
Yeah, absolutely. aws.amazon.com/gametech is the home of all things game tech. And what I really like there is digging deep into what our customers are saying, because people really want to hear from developers about their experience more than they want to hear from AWS. And if you go to that link, you'll get to hear from customers like Activision, customers like Rovio, customers like Apocalypse and Quantic Dream, not only about how they're using the cloud to revolutionize what they're doing in game production, but how they're using things like AI and machine learning to better understand what players want and how they play, and to give them great player experiences, or how they're using, our regions and availability zones to scale globally and support multi-million player events, which I've been in the games industry a long time, and if somebody had told me 10 years ago that we would be supporting, events with 5 million, 10 million concurrent players, that was just unheard of at the time. Seeing that kind of gathering of people, and also the computing horsepower behind it, is so exciting, and it gets me really excited thinking about the kind of game experiences we'll be having in 5 years looking forward, 5 years or 10 years looking forward.
Wonderful. Well, we are at time. Jen, again, worldwide business development lead here for AWS Game Tech. Thank you so much for chatting today. I wish we could go on, but the clock has run out. We've got some more exciting content here on AWS On Air for the next few hours. So if you've been enjoying any of this, stick around. We'll be back in just a minute with our next session.